The laughter carried across the entire rooftop terrace of Canoe, and Maya Thornton recognized it before she even turned around. That laugh, sharp and performative, designed to be heard from across a room. The kind of laugh that said, "Look at me. Look at what I have now." She had been standing near the railing with Elijah Stone, a glass of Riesling in her hand, the Toronto skyline blazing orange and gold behind her, when her body simply knew. The way it always knows things the mind refuses to process. She turned slowly. And there was Marcus Caldwell, her ex-husband, the man who had signed her out of her own life 18 months ago, sitting at the private corner table with his arm draped around the shoulders of Sienna Walsh. 26 years old, a lifestyle influencer with 400,000 followers, and a talent for looking expensive in other people's spaces. The woman Marcus had chosen to replace Maya with, then proceeded to walk into every industry event as if she were some kind of prize he'd earned. Maya had not known he would be here tonight. Nobody had warned her. But Marcus had known. The way his eyes found her the moment she turned told her that. He looked at her the way men like him always looked at women they'd discarded, with casual superiority, expecting to find the same hollowness they left behind. What he found instead made his smile go still. He saw Elijah Stone standing beside her. Elijah Stone, who had just been named to report on Business Magazine's top 10 most powerful names in Canadian media. Elijah Stone, whose production company had greenlit 3 major projects in the last 8 months alone, whose name opened doors that Marcus Caldwell could only press his ear against and listen. Elijah Stone, who was currently resting one hand on the railing close enough to Maya's that anyone paying attention would notice. Everyone was paying attention. Marcus set down his champagne glass. Sienna was still talking, but Marcus was no longer listening. His jaw had tightened in that particular way. Maya had catalogued over 7 years of marriage. The way it tightened when something had happened that he hadn't anticipated and couldn't immediately control. Maya held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned back to Elijah and said something that made her smile, warm and unhurried, as if Marcus Caldwell were simply part of the background noise of a beautiful evening. Behind her, she heard his glass touch the table again. Harder this time, she thought. Good, she thought, we're just getting started. 8 months before that evening on the rooftop, Maya Thornton had been living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Leslieville that smelled faintly of fresh paint and old grief. It wasn't a bad apartment. It had a bay window that faced east and got good morning light, and a kitchen just large enough that she couldn't pace the full length of it without turning around twice. She had been grateful for it in the specific, exhausting way. You are grateful for things that represent the floor, the thing that stopped you from falling further. She had not intended to end up there. She had intended 7 years ago when she married Marcus to build something that lasted. Instead, she had built his brand. That was the honest version of the story, the one she was still learning to say out loud without flinching. When she met Marcus Caldwell, he ran a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Mississauga that was perfectly respectable and almost entirely invisible. He was smart and driven, and he had a quality she mistook for vision, but later understood was simply appetite. An endless hunger to be seen, recognized, elevated. Maya had her own marketing consultancy at the time, boutique but respected, and she had a gift for identifying what was essential about a person or a company and making that thing unmistakable to the world. She put that gift in service of Marcus. She didn't charge him for it. He was her husband. She redesigned his firm's identity from the ground up. She built relationships with journalists and architects and city councilors. She positioned him as a voice on sustainable urban development, got him on panels, got him quoted, got him photographed at the right openings with the right people. Within 4 years, Caldwell Property Group was not mid-sized or invisible. It was the kind of name that got spoken with a certain weight in rooms where weight mattered. And somewhere in the process of building him into something larger, Maya had made herself smaller. Her own consultancy went quiet. She kept telling herself she would return to it, that there would be time, that once Marcus's firm stabilized, she would focus on her own work again. There was always a reason to wait another season. She was 38 when she found the messages. She wasn't looking for them. She had borrowed his tablet to check a flight confirmation while he was in the shower, and there it was. A thread that had been going on for 7 months. which was 4 months longer than Maya had even known Sienna Walsh existed. She sat on the edge of the bed and read the whole thing. She didn't cry. She felt, more than anything, a strange and terrible clarity, as if the room had been slightly out of focus for years and had just corrected itself. When Marcus came out of the bathroom, she was still sitting there with the tablet in her hands. He saw her face and he did not apologize, he explained. That was the word he would have used. Explained, because in Marcus' understanding of the world, everything he did had a rational justification, and the problem was simply that other people hadn't been given enough context. He said their relationship had run its course. He said they wanted different things, he said, and this was the sentence Maya would replay at 3 a.m. for months afterward. You've been comfortable for a long time, Maya. I need someone who still has momentum. Comfortable. After 7 years, after everything she had poured into his name, she moved out within 2 weeks. The apartment in Leslieville was the first one she looked at. She took it because she was too tired to look at more. The separation agreement came through his lawyer fast, aggressively fast, in a way that told her it had been prepared before the conversation on the bed. Marcus kept the house in Forest Hill. Maya kept her personal savings, which were modest, because she had spent the better years of her earning potential on his visibility. She kept her consultancy name, dormant as it was. She kept the clothes in her closet, and the cast-iron pan, and a print of Lauren Harris's Lake Superior that had hung in her home office and that she had bought herself, before him, with her first real client payment. She kept very little else. For the first 3 months she worked. She took every small contract she could find, rewrote her website, sent emails to people she hadn't spoken to in years. Some wrote back. Most were kind. The work was slow to return. She was not entirely sure who she was professionally without the weight of his name beside hers, and that realization, more than the betrayal, more than the empty house, was what kept her up at night. She told herself she was fine. She bought good coffee and took walks along the lakeshore and called her sister on Sundays. She told her sister she was fine. She told her therapist she was managing. She sat in her bay window in the mornings, with her hands around a mug, and looked at the light, and felt the particular loneliness of a person who has misplaced themselves. She didn't know the phone call that would change everything was 6 weeks away. The call came on a Wednesday in November, during a sleet storm that made the city look like wet concrete in every direction. She didn't recognize the number, Toronto area code, which meant nothing. She answered it because she had been waiting to hear back about a contract and had trained herself out of letting calls go to voicemail. Is this Maya Thornton? The voice was measured, unhurried, a voice accustomed to rooms that went quiet when it spoke. Speaking, my name is Elijah Stone. I think you might know the name. She did. Everyone in her industry did. Elijah Stone had built Northlight Media from a single documentary production company into one of the most significant independent media groups in the country. He was private to the point of near invisibility. You heard his name constantly, saw his projects everywhere, rarely encountered him in person. I know the name, she said carefully. How did you get this number? I've been looking for you for about 3 weeks, he said. You're not easy to find when you're not actively looking to be found. That caught her off guard. What do you want? What do you want? There was a brief pause. I want to talk about what you built. I have a consultancy, she said. If you're looking for, I'm not talking about your consultancy. A beat. I'm talking about what you built for Marcus Caldwell. The name landed in the conversation like something dropped from a height. I'm familiar with your work, he continued, his tone even. I've been watching Caldwell Property Group for a while. Not because of Marcus, as it happens, but because the brand strategy behind it is genuinely exceptional. The positioning, the media relationships, the way it moved from invisible to authoritative in under 4 years. I've been trying to figure out who was responsible for that for some time. He paused again. Now I know. Maya stood at her kitchen window, sleet hitting the glass. That work was done during my marriage, she said. I wasn't operating under my own name. No, he said. You weren't. Which is part of why I'm calling. She should have been cautious. She knew she should have been cautious. But something in the specificity of what he said, the positioning, the media relationships, the 4-year timeline, loosened something in her chest because she had not heard anyone name those things as hers before. Not once. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "A conversation," he said. "In person. I think what you're capable of, and what I'm building might be a significant match. But I'd rather tell you that, over coffee than over the phone." She looked at the sleet. She looked at her apartment. She thought about the stack of modest contracts on her kitchen table, and the way her savings account moved in one direction only. "When?" she said. The Northlight offices were in the distillery district, in a building that had kept its original brick and added glass in all the right places. It did not look like money trying to announce itself. It looked like work that took itself seriously, which Maya recognized as its own kind of confidence. Elijah Stone met her at the reception desk rather than making her wait. That surprised her. He was taller than she'd expected, quieter in person than his reputation suggested, a contained energy, like a room before a presentation begins. He walked her to a boardroom with a long oak table and poured her coffee himself, which also surprised her. "I'll be straightforward," he said, sitting across from her. "Northlight is expanding. We're moving into branded content partnerships, long-form, values-driven work with companies that want to build genuine authority, not just noise. I've been looking for someone to lead that division." Maya set down her cup. "There are established people in that space." "There are," he agreed. "I didn't call them." He held her gaze. "I called you because what you did for Caldwell is exactly the kind of slow, deliberate, structural work I'm trying to build. Not a campaign, not a moment. A body of work that holds." Her chest tightened in a way she hadn't expected, because it had held. She knew that. She had watched it hold for 3 years after she stopped actively working on it. Watched the relationships she built continue to generate results. Watched the positioning she'd crafted get quoted and referenced and reinforced. She had watched it hold while Marcus stood in front of it and took every acknowledgement offered. "I should be transparent with you," she said. "My relationship with Marcus ended badly. If that creates a conflict for Northlight in any way." "It doesn't." He said it without hesitation. "What Marcus did with his marriage is his own matter. What you built professionally is a separate and significant thing. I don't confuse the two." She studied him for a moment. "Most people do. Most people are not paying close enough attention," he said. She took the meeting. Then she took a second one. By the third, she had signed an offer letter to join Northlight as creative director of brand strategy, at a salary that was more than she had made in any year of her marriage. She sat in her car afterward in the distillery parking lot for a full 10 minutes. Not crying, just breathing, feeling something she recognized distantly as the sensation of possibility. Marcus found out within 2 weeks. Toronto's creative and business industries were not large enough for things to stay quiet, and someone who saw her name on the Northlight announcement had apparently mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to Marcus. He called her. She let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was so carefully constructed in its casualness that it took her 2 listens to identify the thing underneath it. Unease. "Hey, heard you've got something going with Northlight. That's great, congratulations. Just reach out if you need a reference. Happy to say good things." She didn't call back. He called again. She didn't answer. He texted once. "Seriously though, proud of you." The condescension of it was almost elegant. "Proud of you." As if her professional life were a child's drawing he was generously praising. As if anything she accomplished required his endorsement to be real. She blocked the number. Then she went to work. The next 4 months were the most demanding of her professional life, and also, quietly, the most clarifying. At Northlight she had a team, a budget, real creative authority, and a collaborator in Elijah who understood what she was trying to build and challenged it without undermining it. They disagreed regularly and productively. She found she was better at her work than she had known, which was partly because she had been operating so long in someone else's shadow that she had never seen herself at full size. She also found, slowly and carefully, a version of herself she had set aside. She started running again. She cooked properly. She called her sister not just on Sundays. She let herself want things. A real future, real recognition, eventually something like partnership, without apologizing for the wanting. She was not thinking about Marcus, not very often, not in the consuming way she had in those first months in Leslieville. She was thinking about him slightly more than usual the night of the canoe event, because Northlight was being recognized for a production partnership and the evening felt significant. She was thinking about how far she had moved from that sleek gray apartment, and how strange it was that she had arrived somewhere this bright, this solid, this hers. And then she heard Sienna Walsh's laugh. She would think about what happened next many times in the months that followed, turning it over like a stone she kept finding in her pocket. Marcus made his move before the dinner service ended. She saw him excuse himself from Sienna, leaving her mid-sentence, something Maya recognized, and crossed the terrace toward her. Elijah was briefly in conversation with someone else, and Marcus timed it for that gap with a precision that told her he had been watching her all evening. Maya. He said her name the way he always had, warm, familiar, as if no time had passed and no damage had been done. Marcus. He glanced in the direction where Elijah had been standing. Doing well, it looks like. Yes. Northlight is a serious outfit. He said it as if offering a compliment, which meant he was doing something else entirely. Stone's got good instincts. He does, she agreed. A brief silence. Marcus put his hands in his pockets, a gesture she knew meant he was working towards something. I've actually been thinking about brand work recently. The firm is at a stage where it could use fresh positioning. She looked at him steadily. I was wondering, he said, whether you'd have any interest in consulting. Informally. Given what you know about the company already. No, she said. He blinked. He had expected negotiation. He always expected negotiation, because he believed every no was an opening. I'm fully committed at Northlight, she said, and I wouldn't be the right fit regardless. You built what Caldwell Group is, he said, and for a moment something honest moved across his face. Not gratitude, not quite, but a frank acknowledgement she had not received in 7 years of marriage. That's not nothing. I'm not pretending it is. I know you're not, said. You're pretending it was ours. There's a difference. He was quiet. What I built belongs to me, Maya said. The strategy, the relationships, the positioning. You had my labor, Marcus. That's what you paid me with 7 years of my life to have. And then you kept it and handed me a separation agreement. She kept her voice even. I'm not angry. I'm just not confused about it anymore. Before he could respond, Elijah was back beside her, reading the tension with the specific alertness of someone who noticed everything. He looked at Marcus without warmth or hostility, simply with the kind of settled confidence that doesn't require performance. Marcus Caldwell, Elijah said pleasantly. I think we've met briefly. Elijah Stone. Marcus shook his hand. A flicker moved behind his eyes, the recalibration of a man suddenly aware he was outmatched in a way he hadn't prepared for. Good event, Marcus said. Not to Maya now, to the room in general, to nobody. It is, Elijah agreed. Marcus nodded once. Then he walked back across the terrace to where Sienna was waiting with a look on her face that suggested the conversation had taken longer than she appreciated. Maya exhaled slowly through her nose. Old acquaintance, Elijah asked. Former client, she said. It was not the whole truth. But it was the true part that mattered tonight. The story might have ended there, if Marcus had been a different kind of man. If Sienna Walsh had been a different kind of woman. If the two of them, together, had simply chosen to leave well enough alone. They were not those people. 3 weeks after the canoe event, Maya was in a morning briefing at Northlight when her phone began filling up with notifications. She ignored them until the meeting ended, then stepped into the hallway to look at what had accumulated. The first was a link from a colleague, a piece on an industry blog she knew, the kind that occupied the space between legitimate journalism and strategic rumor. The headline was, Northlight brand directors past ties to Caldwell Property Group raise questions about client conflicts. She read it. Her face went still. The article quoted unnamed sources suggesting Maya had left Caldwell Property Group under disputed circumstances. It raised questions about the ownership of brand materials and strategic documents developed during what it carefully described as a professional partnership. It included a quote from a source close to the Caldwell organization, suggesting that certain intellectual property created during Maya's time with the firm had never been formally assigned and remained a point of contention. Her hands were not shaking. She noted this with some detachment. She called her lawyer before she called anyone else. Her lawyer, a deliberate woman named Patricia Ossie, who did not waste words, listened to the summary and said, "Send me everything, every document, every email, every file you retain from that period." "There's a lot," Maya said. "Good," said Patricia. Bring all of it. What Maya had, what she had kept, quietly, not out of strategy, but out of the simple, professional habit of keeping one's own records, was significant. She had the original creative briefs, in her handwriting and her document formats. She had email chains showing the development of every major campaign element, every media relationship, every positioning decision. She had timestamps. She had drafts. She had, in one critical case, a voice memo she had recorded for herself during a working session in 2021, describing a strategic framework that would later appear, almost verbatim, as Marcus's own keynote address at a developers conference. Patricia reviewed everything over 48 hours. When she called back, her voice was very calm. "Maya," she said, "what you have here is not just a defense. It's a claim. What kind of property? The creative work you produced during your marriage was never formally assigned to Caldwell Property Group or to Marcus personally. Your separation agreement addressed assets and property. It didn't address professional intellectual property, because Marcus's lawyer apparently didn't think it needed to, or perhaps assumed you wouldn't notice." Maya sat with that for a moment. "He assumed I wouldn't notice." "Almost certainly," Patricia said dryly. "I'd like to file." Marcus received the notice on a Thursday morning. Maya was told about his reaction secondhand, by someone who had been in the Caldwell offices that day. He had gone very quiet when he read it, the kind of quiet that preceded something loud. Then he had closed his office door and not come out for an hour. Sienna, apparently, had taken the approach of going on her social media channels and posting something oblique and glittering about knowing your worth and protecting your energy, which most of her followers interpreted as a vague relationship observation, and several industry people interpreted correctly. The comments were enthusiastic in the direction Maya would have predicted. What Marcus had not anticipated, what neither of them had anticipated, was Elijah. Elijah had said nothing publicly. He didn't operate that way. But Northlight's legal team had quietly contacted 3 of the journalists Marcus' firm regularly worked with and clarified, in terms that were cordial and complete, that the brand strategy work for which Caldwell Property Group had received significant coverage had been originated by a Northlight employee, and that the question of attribution was now subject to legal review. The coverage stopped. Not dramatically, just stopped. Articles that had been in progress were quietly shelved. A profile that Marcus had been expecting in a major business publication was postponed indefinitely. Maya didn't ask Elijah to do this. When she found out, she went to his office. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He looked up from his desk. "No," he agreed. "But it was accurate, and journalists appreciate accuracy. Marcus is going to think I asked you. Let him." He held her gaze steadily. "Maya, what he's trying to do is take the last thing you have that's still clearly yours. I'm not going to watch that happen and call it none of my business." She looked at him for a long moment. "I want to be clear that I can handle this." "I know you can," he said simply. "I'm not handling it instead of you. I'm handling it alongside you. There's a difference." It was almost exactly what she had said to Marcus at the canoe event. She recognized it and felt something shift in her chest. The legal process moved faster than she expected. Marcus, it emerged through discovery, had made the fundamental error of believing that, because Maya had never formally objected to anything during their marriage, she had tacitly agreed to all of it. His lawyer built an argument on that premise. It was not a strong argument in the face of dated documentation. 3 months after Patricia filed, a settlement was reached. Not in a courtroom. Marcus wouldn't risk a public proceeding. In a boardroom, with lawyers on both sides and a mediator who said very little because there wasn't much to mediate once the evidence was examined. Marcus was required to provide formal attribution for the brand work on all future communications, referencing the growth of Caldwell Property Group. He was required to remove several pieces of content from the company's owned channels that had presented his strategic framework as self-generated. He was required to pay a licensing fee substantial, though not ruinous, for the continued use of the identity system Maya had created. It was not everything. It was not the full accounting of 7 years. But it was something the law could actually give her, her name, attached to her work, on the record. She sat in Patricia's car after, in the parking garage beneath the downtown office tower, and let herself feel it. Not triumph, something quieter and more durable. something that felt like the closing of a door she had left open too long, not because she wanted to go back through it, but because she hadn't yet found the strength to close it. "You good?" Patricia asked. "Yeah," Maya said. "I think I actually am." She ran into Sienna Walsh once more. It was at a charity event in the spring. The kind of evening where the city's charitable and creative communities overlapped enough that crossings were inevitable. Sienna arrived with Marcus, then appeared not to arrive with Marcus, then left an hour before him in the particular way that suggested the performance of being a couple had become more work than it was worth. Maya didn't approach her. Sienna approached Maya. She looked up close, younger than her photographs, and also more tired. There was something in her eyes that Maya recognized without pleasure. The beginning of understanding. The early stages of realizing that the person you aligned yourself with is not the person you believed him to be. "I didn't write that article," Sienna said without preamble. "I want you to know that. The blog post. I didn't write it or source it." Maya looked at her. "I know," she said. "Marcus did." Sienna's jaw tightened slightly. "He told me it was a misunderstanding. A former colleague who'd gotten the wrong idea." "He says that about a lot of things," Maya said quietly. A brief silence. "I'm sorry," Sienna said. The words came out with the careful quality of something that had been considered and reconsidered. "For my part I'm sorry." Maya nodded once. She didn't say it's fine, because it wasn't entirely. But she also didn't say anything else, because the woman standing in front of her was not her enemy. She was something more complicated, a person who had made choices and was beginning to live in their consequences. "Take care of yourself," Maya said, and meant it. The Northlight Spring Showcase was held at the harborfront in May. When the lake was finally doing what the lake does in spring, enormous and silver blue and full of something that felt like promise. Maya stood at the water's edge before the event began, in a dress that fit well and shoes that were worth the price, and a feeling she was still getting used to: steadiness. Elijah found her there. He had a habit of finding her in the quiet moments before things began, which she had come to understand was intentional. "Ready?" he said. "Yes." She paused. "I want to say something before we go in." He waited. "I know what tonight is for Northlight," she said. "I know how much the last 8 months of work has built toward it, and I want you to know." She stopped, finding the right words. "I don't take for granted what you gave me. Not the job. The room. You gave me room to be what I actually am, and I don't know that I'd understood what I was capable of without it." Elijah was quiet for a moment. The lake moved behind him, indifferent and vast. "You would have found it eventually," he said. "I just moved the timeline." "Maybe." She looked at him directly. "But it mattered that you saw it first, before I did." He held her gaze, and what moved across his face was not the composed, careful expression she was used to from him in professional settings. It was something quieter and more personal, something that had been there for a while, she thought, and that he had been patient enough not to rush. "I've been wanting to tell you something," he said. "For some time. I wanted to wait until the legal matter was resolved so you'd know it wasn't about the work, or strategy, or anything with a practical calculation behind it." "Tell me," she said. "I think you are one of the most remarkable people I have met, in a professional life full of remarkable people," he said. "And I would very much like to know you in a way that has nothing to do with work." The lake was enormous behind him. The city was beginning its evening transformation into light. Maya felt something that was not quite happiness, something more specific than that, something like arriving, after a long and poorly marked drive, at the place she had actually been heading. "I'd like that too," she said. The following year moved the way good years do, not without difficulty, but with the kind of difficulty that builds rather than erodes. Maya's division at Northlight won an industry award in the fall. She hired 3 people she believed in completely. She spoke on a panel about brand strategy and creative attribution, and afterward a woman came up to her and said quietly, "I needed to hear exactly that." And Maya understood what she meant. Marcus Caldwell's firm remained operational and probably always would, because the structures of power are not dismantled by a single legal settlement. But the name carried now a different weight, slightly more complicated, slightly less uncontested. Certain journalists asked certain questions they had not asked before. The narrative Marcus had constructed was still standing, but its foundation was less certain, and enough people knew whose hands had actually laid it. Sienna was no longer in his life by October. Maya heard this without satisfaction and without grief. It simply was. And on a Sunday in November, 1 year almost to the week, from the sleet storm and the phone call that had changed everything, Maya Thornton sat at the kitchen table in her new apartment, larger now, with a bay window that faced west for the afternoon light, and had coffee with Elijah while the city did the thing Canadian cities do in November. Went silver and cold and still, beautiful in the specific way of things that have survived something. She looked at the Harris print on the wall, Lake Superior, the one she had bought herself, with her first real client payment, before any of it. She thought about all the versions of herself that had lived alongside that print. The younger one, confident and hopeful. The married one, slowly made smaller. The one who sat in Leslieville and held a mug and wondered if she would find her way back. She thought, I did not need to be saved. I needed to be seen. And then I needed to see myself. She thought those are different things, and both of them matter. Outside, the city went on being itself, enormous and cold and lit from within. And Maya Thornton went on being herself, which was, she had finally learned, more than enough.